if you're looking and you're taka looking, the truth is accessible and you'll find the truth. So someone that's taka looking, I believe will get to the emes. And you see, I think you see b'muchash, Yidden that versuchen, come to Chassidus, come to Torah, come to Yiddishkeit. Everything else is empty. This is the real stuff. That's the deepest, most real motivation for me to learn, for you to learn, for anyone to learn Torah. This is my Hira B'Chaim. This is my guidebook for life.
If you've been enjoying this podcast, please like and subscribe so that others can enjoy it as well. In addition, if you've benefited in any way from Among Chassidim podcast and would like to give something back, you can do so today at derher.org/donate. I'm Yossi Kamman. Welcome to Among Chassidim by Derher, an ongoing farbrengen about life as a chassid, our vibrant connection with the Rebbe, and inspired living shaped by the way he teaches us each and every day. Baruchim habayim, my dear brother, how are you?
Baruch Hashem. Good. How are you?
Okay. Baruch Hashem, thank you very much for being here all the way from Toronto. And I think we should begin with the Peschim B'Dvar Malchus. You always have something to share and something on your mind. So maybe we'll start with that. How does that sound?
Sure. That's the Seder. But maybe one step before, it says there's a Milsa de B'dichase, and then Pasach B'Shmaitze. So,
okay, like a real rabbi.
I was just thinking to myself, the whole idea over here of Chassidim coming together to durchreden Inyan is more like a farbrengen. Did I kind of get it right?
I would say so, for sure. It's a different format and different style, but it might even have some milas over traditional farbrengen, which I don't know if we have to discuss now. Maybe we can discuss later.
Right, but the recording and the pictures and the cameras and the microphones, the formalities of it is a little bit interesting. So it reminded me, there was a story circulating when they made the first recording of Nechayach, and they hired a Yid that was a professional, not a Lubavitcher, and he practiced with them, and he rented a studio in Manhattan, and he's metired the first recording that, he had his time that they were supposed to start the recording. They're paying, every hour in this fancy studio in Manhattan, and he doesn't see his chavra. Finally, like mamash, at the last minute, he's watching out the window. He sees a huge group of chassidim coming with women, with their wives. He couldn't understand where they're going, where they're coming, and all of a sudden they all pile into the studio, and much more than the people. He had I think 16 people that were supposed to sing, and they start unpacking cake and mashpia. He's like, "What's going on over here?" So they said, "What do you mean making a farbrengen?" So he says, "Now? Here? Like, why?" He says, "What do you mean? You think we're just singers coming like a microphone and sing? This is the Rebbe's Ashlichus. We're coming here to spread the Nigunei Chabad, so we have to, the Chonvarim and Abyssal, we have to get in the mode." And sure enough, they started farbrengen. He said, "When is it? How long is this farbrengen?" He says, "As soon as it finishes, then it's over." They tell him. So they start farbrengen, and then after they not fabrach, but the Chonvarim, then they went to the Nigunim, and it wasn't stam gesungen in a microphone. It was with disragshus, with shtabchus hanefesh. So somehow we have to rise above, all the recordings. I see you have, your astronaut things on there. I got a little bit of a smaller thing to make it a farbrengen. I don't know, virtually to sagen l'chaim or to singen anigen. I don't know if the Nigunim work, over the internet. They might, sometimes the Nigunim crash into each other. But Al Kolpan, I think what you said is good. Peschim B'Dvar Malchus, which is Yenishal Torah. So that will be, it's tak a little bit of truken, but there will be a little bit of a Yenishal Torah, maybe even more than just a gashmistik l'chaim. So just a short vart, and obviously it's in everyone's mind, the terrible osun, the tragedy that took place in Sydney, Yidden, including shluchim that were killed at Kiddush Hashem. So just a short thought. This was by farbrengen not long after Yud Shvat Tovshin Yud, obviously a big osun for Kilas Chabad, the Rebbe Befrat. And when the Rebbe would farbreng, this was obviously coming up throughout the farbrengens in Tovshin Yud. So I think it was Shabbos Mevarchim Tammuz that would farbreng still Hamshach to that the Friedgeber told him to farbreng Shabbos Mevarchim, so there wasn't any official Kabbalas and Asiyas. And the Rebbe said a Geschmack Wort on the Bracha Yechad Sheyu that we bench at the end of the Mevarchim es HaChedesh. That we know that we say, L'chaim u'L'shalom, L'sasin u'L'simcha, L'shul v'nechama v'neimer Amen. But we say Amen after each refrain. L'chaim u'L'shalom, we say Amen, L'sasin u'L'simcha, Amen. L'shul v'nechama v'neimer Amen, we say Amen again. The Rebbe asked a question on the Nusach. If you're saying Amen each time of these three phrases, so why only at the end does it say v'neimer Amen? The Rebbe explained the Geschmack of art. When you say L'chaim u'L'shalom, you say L'sasin u'L'simcha, these are Tov Hanir v'Nigla. You don't need encouragement to say Amen. You hear that, wow, Amen, for sure. Everyone from Zech Alein will scream Amen. When you hear Yeshuv v'Nechama, what does it mean, Yeshuv v'Nechama? Yeshuv v'Nechama means that there was tzar, that there was yogin, there was something negative, but we're saying the Eibishter will give us Yeshuv v'Nechama. When you hear that, sagt sich nicht Amen so easily. We need the Shliach Tzibur to push and to encourage Chavre. We have to say Amen to that too. Why? We're anticipating a Chodesh, we're anticipating a year. We hope for Tov Hanir. We don't hope for anything negative. But yet, we need to be pushed, and we have to say Amen to that too. Because we know that even when there is something negative, the Eibishter is the one that's sending us Yeshuv v'Nechama, v'neimer Amen. We also say Amen to that, because even when that situation does arise, we have the guarantee of the Berach of the Eibishter that there will be Yeshuv v'Nechama at the end. That's the word.
Okay. So Chitaka could be a Yeshua and a Nechama.
Amen. Amen.
Regarding this situation and regarding the Golus at large.
For sure.
Okay, so I think another way that we can discuss is that I know that we're brothers, but there's a age gap. The Rebbe says a chicha hagadol. I'm not sure if it's only the oldest brother. You're not the oldest, but or it's any older brothers. Maybe someone can send me if it's included all older brothers or not. But definitely. There's a lot that, is a big part due to our age gap, things that I heard from you and learned from you over the years. And one of the things is that we're born in the same family, but at very different times. I was born before Gimel Tammuz, but I grew up pretty much afterwards. And while you were not an older bacher, you were youngish, but definitely you had a different experience growing up with the Rebbe. Begali for Gimel Tammuz, and maybe you can share some of that with me.
Okay, that's a plan. I do want to say that I look a little bit older than I am because the Eibishter gave me a little bit more white. A lot of times people do think I'm the oldest because my beard is a little bit longer than all my brothers put together. You see the end? Okay. So, but I do have some memories, but I want to backtrack, if I may, one step behind. Because our collective memories are a hemshech to our father, like you mentioned. We're brothers, it's true. I remember when you were born shortly before my bar mitzvah. Hey, Elu, right? I got it right? And I was Tesvav El Tavshinun Aleph for my bar mitzvah. So,
and I think did you go to dollars right before your bar mitzvah? Do you remember?
I did. Now, I don't remember if it was mamish. It wasn't the day of my bar mitzvah. Was on a Sunday, if I remember correctly. You could check the calendar. So I don't think I went that day. We were living in Monsey then. And, the tiltul, the day of the bar mitzvah, maybe if I would have been a bigger chassid, I would have went that day. But I think I went the week before, if I remember correctly.
So what day is that? What's the math?
Math, I'll leave for somebody else.
Because I could be it's that. I have to check the video, but I think it's during that dollars that Tati told the Rebbe that my wife just had a baby boy regarding me. I think it's probably that Sunday. I have to look the video to see if you were there. I can imagine you were there. And the Rebbe said, this is for your wife. Another dollar. And the Rebbe said, good news, banim scharim.
Yeah,
so that was... it's probably in connection with Bar Mitzvah, although you had Yeshivas also. So whatever. Okay, Go ahead.
I'm not sure if that was the same time. The next day after my Bar Mitzvah, I was able to get an aliyah by the Rebbe on Monday. And obviously that was a big part of my Bar Mitzvah. But again, backtracking, since we share fathers, so we could share this too. Really, our beginnings and our connection to the Rebbe begins with our father, our parents.
And your mother also, right?
Mother too, for sure. So I was always interested to know, how did that story come about? And how did our father get connected to the Rebbe, to Chassidus, to Yiddishkeit? So I remember a few times hearing that he said that his brother, Uncle Shmuel, called him up. They were in different places, and he said, called him by his first name, he said, what you've been looking for all along, it's in your back pocket. You're looking for Eibishter, you're looking for the purpose in life, you're looking for a deeper meaning. And unfortunately, he didn't think to turn to Yiddishkeit because he thought spirituality and Ruchnis and Alikus is elsewhere. And he told him, no, what you're looking for is in your back pocket. So now I wanted to backtrack the story a little bit more. So how did Uncle Shmuel come to the Rebbe? So I asked him, and he said, oh, our cousin Levi Garbos invited him. How did
I spoke to him last night, by the way.
Okay. So he said I forget where he was, and Levi calls him up and he says, why don't you come to New York for the weekend? Okay, that sounds interesting. He didn't tell what he was coming for. Come to New York for the weekend. He thought, to party, whatever it is. And he comes to Crown Heights. What does he know the difference? Manhattan, Brooklyn, same, which stop on the train to get off. And he comes, and Levi was then, I think, in Hadar Torah learning in Yeshiva. So kind of quiet. They had a Suda Shabbos. So he's like, where's the party? So he says, the party's tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And the party was the Rebbe's Fabrengen. And he comes to the Rebbe's Fabrengen, so he never saw such a thing in his life. Yidden and Chassidim, and he saw the emes pushed from their faces, shining. He saw the Rebbe, and it was a Fabrengen, and people were helpful to guest, and he gave him a place, and he was able to sit. He didn't understand the word, obviously, not Yiddish, not Lashon HaKodesh. But I forget if he told me this was during the Fabrengen or after the Fabrengen. He burst out in tears. He was crying, just unstopping tears. And Levi asked him, did somebody say something to you? Did you get impacted by something by the Fabrengen? He didn't think anything really registered. He says, no, I didn't understand the word. No, I didn't understand anything. Okay, so what's going on? He says, I saw a human being for the first time in my life. That's how he described being by the Rebbe. Anyway, so the hamshich to that, he invited Tati to come. He said, this is what you've been looking for. Now, by the way, one step back. I was trying to trace it back to the source. So now I want to know, okay, so how did Levi Garbos end up by the Rebbe? Mm-hmm. So if I remember correctly, I'm saying things from what I heard conversations.
Yeah, by the way, Levi Garbos might have to come on and correct us, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I might be mixing it up a little bit, but if I understand correctly, he was reading Yiddish literature. He was very enamored by the shtetl. The shtetl, he wanted to see this shtetl, and it was in the books, not live. So he heard that in New York, it's been recreated. He wants to find the shtetl. He wants to be in the shtetl. So he comes to the Lower East Side, and he's schmoozing with guys, and he goes into a store, and there's a Chossid, not a Lubavitch Chossid, with a levush, and he says he wants to come to the shtetl. So this guy looks at him, what am I going to do with this guy? So he says, what do you do when such a person comes to you? You send him to Lubavitch.
No, I have to correct you, because this I know. It was, yeah. He walked into Label Bistritsky's store.
No, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I'm before that.
Okay.
How did he get to Label Bistritsky's store? This other Chossid didn't know what to do with this Yid that doesn't look like he has any shaykhs to Frumkeit and Yiddishkeit, and he wants to discover Yiddishkeit in the shtetl. So he sent him to Label Bistritsky's store. And when he went to Rebbe Bistritsky's store, he sent him to Lubavitcher. And the Lubavitcher set him up for Shabbos. And I don't know all the details after that, but that's how he got exposed to. So here you have three people. Listen to it for a moment. You have three people that are looking. They're searching. One is looking for the shtetl, which was his way of looking for his neshama, for Yiddishkeit, for the emes. Another person is looking for humanity. Uncle Shmuel, didn't have the easiest life. He maybe saw a lot of behemoths on 2 feet. And now he sees humanity, he sees anushiyas, he sees menschlichkeit, he sees realness. Tati's looking for touching the infinite, grabbing Ein Sof somehow, and they're all searching for the emes in their way, and that's what led them to the Rebbe. So what I think when I think about these ideas is that we, as born Lubavitchers, have to also begin that search, and not just begin it because we're already in the middle of it, but continue the search, and that's going to make our iskashus that much more real, our Avodas Hashem that much more real, chinuch atzmei, chinuch zulasei, that we're searching and we're looking to get closer to the emes, and we're achieving that through our connection to the Eibishter, as taught by the Hadrach and the Torah of the Rebbe. Now, you asked me to get to my personal memories. Okay, I'll share that a little bit. I don't have any major stories to tell. Like I said, I was young. And over the years, obviously, Baruch Hashem Zeicha, to many opportunities to be with the Rebbe, davening with the Rebbe, being by Fabrengens. I still remember as a young child, weekday Fabrengens, where we actually had these little things that we had in our ear. That 770 was always on the top of technology. We'd go to the kollel and pay, I think, a deposit and get this little transistor thing that we would. Tati would usually listen to the translation. If I was getting an extra special gift, I would get my own too to listen a little bit. Definitely there and being present. And obviously, every moment is tired. I always had an interesting thing. Maybe it was a little childish. I wanted the Rebbe to give me attention. Never happened, Begashmis, at least at that point. But I felt like, in a way, a certain yira, a certain Chassidus HaKadosh of the Rebbe. Like I didn't feel like I was just able to approach the Rebbe. Like even when I wanted to, I was never comfortable speaking to the Rebbe, like going by when there was giving out dollars for tzedakah. I think the one time that I did say something was that dollars that I was mentioning before my bar mitzvah. But I had a svar to mention other times. I didn't feel comfortable. I felt like in front of the Rebbe, I was like totally like lost. And I think I managed to say something. I don't think it was that coherent. And the Rebbe gave me an extra $1. I think the Rebbe said B'suras Tevis or some additional lashon of a bracha. I still remember after that $1 trying to reconstruct, because even after I said something and the Rebbe responded, I was confused as to what the Rebbe actually said, and I was trying to figure it out. And put on the $1, I think that they said this by this $1 and that by the next $1, and I was trying to keep track which $1 was the first and the second. But I always had that like she'ifa that the Rebbe should give me a certain personal yachas. Interestingly enough, I remember Tati once told me, he said that after he hears all these stories coming out of people's interactions with the Rebbe, they put a lot of times on video, my story, my encounter. Like, why did I listen to all the instructions of my Mashpia and my Yeshivas to just come into Yeshivas and not say anything and just put my title? I should have told the Rebbe who I am, what's going on, a similar idea, but obviously more in an adult way. And if you can say, like you mentioned, before Gimel Tammuz, after Gimel Tammuz, and you mentioned that you were too young to process it, I was also too young to process it. And I don't know if people that were older than me also were necessarily old enough. Years are not just measured by the password to process and to appreciate. And I could say for myself, and it's very applicable today to everyone that's possibly listening and taking something from this, that my personal relationship, I feel, took off after Gimel Tammuz in multiple ways. Number one, I do feel that I did get a yachas prati. The Rebbe says famously that when you have a question, something which you want to ask a bracha, and a eitz of the Rebbe, you can ask the question, bring it to the oil, or go to the oil, the Rebbe wird gefinnen, avek zu entferen. I have a number of stories when things were really important to me, certain major junctures in my life, that I got very direct hadracha, each time slightly in a different method, how I, maybe it's safe to say a little bit totally behergish, how I felt that was the Rebbe's answer. But I'll definitely, from the Rebbe's point of view, for sure he's connected. But even from my point of view, I sensed it and I felt it. And the Eit Chazon Lamed, and I don't know if I'm going to prod them in that direction, but definitely something which I could say measurably, I could feel a Yachas Prati and Hadracha Pratis in major decisions in my life. But I think the most important point is something that goes deeper than that. The connection to the Rebbe that defines who I am or how I would like to be, and how I'm molding myself based on the Rebbe's Torah and the Rebbe's Hadracha. That's something which only comes, like I mentioned before, when you're searching and you're looking and you're trying to get closer to the emes, and the Rebbe's Taka showing you that emes. And when you're in the Rebbe's Torah, it's not a segula for his kashrus. It is his kashrus. This is the way you're connecting. This is the way the Rebbe is becoming part of your life. This is the way the Rebbe is molding your viewpoint, molding your decisions in life, molding how you understand everything in life, how you understand Torah, how you have a derach in your chinuch of your children, the chinuch of your talmidim, in your own personal day-to-day decisions. And that I could say that in some way or another, Chossid could say that he is changed and molded and shaped out by the Rebbe being my Adineinu, Meireinu, V'Rabbeinu, in each detail of my life. That's the real personal hiskashus. Now, even the direct idea of more personal attention, it's interesting, just to point out in my years that I do remember, it wasn't the user of the chafs, wasn't even the lamas, it was the mems, the nuns, late mems. Interesting that the Rebbe did start doing more often personal encounters with Chassidim. Not yichidisin and lengthy discussions, but the idea of chalukas, the dollars for tzedakah, kontreisim, all those opportunities of a personal moment, what they call it, my moment with the Rebbe, it's a real thing. And that's something which I hold tight till today, even the pictures that are making it permanent. It seems that possibly, this is b'derech efshar, ich weiß nicht, was the Rebbe's cheshbeinos are, the Rebbe was almost like looking for ways to create that personal connection. In years that there was somewhat of a distance and a natural feeling of the Rebbe being more of a melech and attack a certain yiras or reimamus, here the Rebbe was giving opportunities to connect. And the truth is, all the years, by the way, there was a middle of Fabrengens. I do remember this too, by Fabrengens, between the sichos, the Rebbe would turn and nod his head and say l'chaim to individual chassidim with that direct eye contact connection. I remember the first time that I was processing what was happening. There was, I think, an older bacher, a staff member that helped me get a particular place. And I was going to say l'chaim to them. I'm like, how am I going to know if the Rebbe is looking at me? There's so many people here. I said, don't worry, the Rebbe is looking at you. He's only looking at you. And when the Rebbe looked at me, everyone around me, not just myself, everyone around me turned to me. They're like, they felt how the Rebbe like kind of, zeroed in on me. Interestingly, also after Chav Zayin Adar, I don't know how many people paid attention to this. I don't know if it was as violent, but the Rebbe also made a point of scanning the crowd. And on the videos, you could also see this, on the balcony. You could see this also on videos. Many times, the Rebbe would lean forward, because basically then everyone was facing Ma'ariv to see the Rebbe. And if you were too close to the Rebbe, you were basically out of the Rebbe's line of vision. You had to be a little bit further towards Mizrach, because the balcony is higher up, and if you're down, you're just seeing the wood of the balcony. So you have to push back to be able to see the Rebbe. And those people could just barely see the Rebbe, but the Rebbe wasn't really seeing them. The Rebbe would, I don't know if it was every time, or it definitely happened quite often, the Rebbe would lean forward to scan even those chassidim that were not in the big crowd, to catch a personal glimpse of them. But again, that's more Mamaylu Lamata. And I feel the most important, I cherish and biyaka, and I thank the Eibishter for every moment that I was with the Rebbe Begashmias. But honestly, the biggest schus that I feel I could have and that a chassid can have is making himself into a chassid of the Rebbe through the Rebbe's Torah, through the Rebbe's Hadracha, Derech Asher Hiranu, Netzach Salavad. This is the deepest personal connection. I'm not just saying this because that's the emes. I'm saying this because for myself personally, this is my emes too. And I think it's something that everyone can tap into.
Mm-hmm. I remember hearing a recording I heard this many years ago, but I heard a recording of Rabbi Aron Kamman in later years. I don't know, it's Tafshanun or something like that. And if I recall correctly, what he says is, why is the Rebbe giving out dollars? He says the Rebbe wants the Rebbe wants to know the crowd. That's it. So that's Alter Chossid. That was his his insight or whatever, his perspective of what similar to what you're saying. So so you're saying that there's an advantage, that for you personally at least, when you were there and being in the atmosphere, there's also a matter of years, if you're younger and older, but there's a certain reichkeit that you have and learn to appreciate afterwards. That's what you're saying. Okay, so I guess that's a hira for everyone, especially today when we don't have even an option to decide how we have to make a connection. But it's interesting to hear from someone that that had sort of both perspectives to a limited extent. Okay. And I do remember hearing from you over the years different things, a little bit about the atmosphere. So you talked after Chav Zayin Adar. I think you described to me once the running to 770 whenever the beepers went off and things like that. So that's definitely something that I heard from around the Shabbos table from you and from other brothers. So that definitely, I mean, that you can't the schos that you had that, but obviously that there's was it like a certain point that you realized that you have to acquire Chassidus? Like did it happen, or it's like over the years that's something they developed?
The point at one particular moment, like in a more childish way around my bar mitzvah, I started, like many Bachrim have this, Erenskite phase around the bar mitzvah, which is a beautiful thing.
It's called the bar mitzvah fever.
Yeah, I definitely had that. And Baruch Hashem, because I was around the Rebbe then, I have to say from a practical point of view, those moments that I had with the Rebbe are probably due to that, because that strengthened my connection. We were living in Monsey then, don't forget, and I, Baruch Hashem, have most of the Kuntreisim, even though we were not living in Crown Heights then, because I was keeping in loop and I was still involved, and I was making sure I was actually learning a Maris down then, and the Cheder and then the Mesifta, they had a little Cheder and Mesifta there, but I was keeping in touch and making sure that I would go into Crown Heights, and then I don't remember how I would get back and then stay overnight. I don't think parents do this with kids anymore, just let them, take a ride to a different place. But because of that connection at that time, that definitely helped me capture those moments. But the idea of really looking for the emes and looking for my connection to the Eibishter and looking for being who I'm meant to be and being Megalamai Neshama, which is really what the Alter says in Perek Beis and Tanya of what Reish B'nai Yisrael does, I can't really put a date on that. I think that's something which, as I grew older and that became more of what I was looking to be, I started realizing that the Rebbe is the address, Kol Mevakesh Hashem, like the pasuk says in Parshas Kisisa. Is going to go to Moshe Rabbeinu because he's going to give you those tools to be able to connect.
Okay. So let me ask you like this: You're Mashpia in the yeshiva in Toronto, and in the Zal. Yes. So you are Isha chinuch, although chinuch very often means children. It means, Mesifta Bachrim, children. So the Zal Bachrim are a little bit in between. They're not yet fully developed, so they're still children in that sense. On the other hand, they have certain elements of them that are more adult-like. They're older, 17, 18. So I don't know if we're addressing Bachrim right now. Maybe we're addressing Bachrim, maybe we're addressing the parents of the Bachrim. What would you say are some important either chinuch advice or priorities or things that are important for that age group, whether it's to the Bachrim themselves or to the parents that have Bachrim that age or have younger children that will be that age?
A very good question. I just want to add one more group to the audience. You mentioned the parents and the Bachrim, the Mechanechim and the Mashpiyim and the Malamdim are also obviously part of the audience, and we're all partners in the chinuch. And everyone himself is chinuch atzmai, and that's the best way to be mechanech others. So anything of chinuch, automatically everyone is in the audience. There's no one that could say he's out of it, whether somebody Megashmis doesn't have children. Any musig of chinuch is applicable to every person, starting with himself and the way he's mashpia on others. I would say there's a number of important points that I could share with you. I'll start with the one which is a little bit technical, and then maybe we could clarify that, and then we'll get to the second point a little bit later. The first point is something which I think is crucial, and I wouldn't really address the Talmidim themselves. This is more addressed to the Mechanechim and the parents. Like you mentioned, I am a Mashpia in Sha'al of Zal, the first year of Zal, and Baruch Hashem, Bachrim, you could see a lot of them. They have Chayis, they have Torah in them, and they're ready to go to the next level. There are Bachrim that sometimes will come at later stage in Yeshiva where they're already done 8 years of elementary Cheder and 3 years of Mesifta, and sometimes they Pashut are lacking important basic skills of learning that everything that they've been learning and everything that they're meant to be doing now is built on. And when a Bachar doesn't have that, it's very, very hard to build it at that age, and especially because you need to have the Bachar to buy into it. You can't push on the Bachar to start memorizing Taichin and breaking down Shirashim and practicing Ivra Kriya with you. Although there are exceptions that I've set that up for some Bachrim, there are, I don't know the numbers, I didn't make a statistic over here, I'll leave that to others, but there's enough that it's something that should be pointed out.
One of the integral components of being a Chassid are the Chassidus Yamim Tovim and Yom Pagra. Whether it's Hey Tevis, Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Nisan, or Gimel Tammuz. These days give us an opportunity to connect with our Rabbeim, to connect with each other, and be better Chassidim. What is the story behind each of these days? How did the Rebbe commemorate and celebrate these days? And most importantly, what are the lessons, the takeaways, and the action items Hamaisa Hua Ikir needed for each of these days? All of this and much, much more are answered in the new set recently published by Der Herr. Our Days is a journey through the Chabad calendar in story, meaning, and practice. With over 700 beautiful, glossy pages with elevated content, beautiful, beautiful photographs, you, your family, and friends will enjoy and live with each Chassidus Yom Tiv. This book is a must for every Lubavitcher home, for every shul, for every school. It is a perfect gift item. This will not collect dust. It will be used day after day, month after month, year after year. You can have this set. Go to derher.org/Our Days. Order your set today and start living with Chassidus Yom Tov.
Every stage of chinuch has a certain accomplishment that you're doing right then of davening, of learning, of Yerushalayim, but also has, let's call it a skill building element, which is needed to be taken to the next year and build on that, and that builds on the next stage. Now, Baruch Hashem, Alamdim, Ibr and they have systems that generally work, but let's face it, the reality is that from basically Kita Aleph and onward, the Malamed is talking to a group. In Mamish, the younger ages, kindergarten, pre-1A, there's more one-on-one. I don't know if every cheder is like this, but as far as I know, by and large, once you get to Kita Aleph, it's a Malamed learning with a group. Now, there are systems in place to build those skills. They're not just learning a pasuk here and a pasuk there and a mishnah there. They're building their skills in Lashon HaKodesh, v'chulu, and Yediyas and Torah. But not every child will end up getting the skill that he needed at that stage. And here's where the Malamedim and the parents step in. I'm not going to go into the whole great debate about homework, about whether it's beneficial or it's needed, or whatever it is. There are svaras lekan or lekan, and I have an opinion on it, but that's not for right now. I'm not going to go into that. But one thing I know for sure, if a child is not perfected in the skill that they need to achieve at that part of the year, or that kufa of the year, that year as a whole, and they're going to the next level without that skill, you push it, setting them up for failure. The malamdim need to be honest with the parents. Don't just smooth things over and say everything is good and only focus on the miles. Of course, when you speak to that parent, you want to emphasize the mila first and talk about the qualities of their child. And this is not a chesar, it's not necessarily anything the child did. Maybe it's harder for him, maybe you need a little bit of a different system. Zero in on that particular skill that child needs. Show the parents what needs to be done. If the parent will sit, the father will sit with his son for 20 minutes every day and dedicate himself to building that skill, there will be pages. And he'll make sure that his son is ready for the next stage. The Alter Rebbe Yeshivas Lubavitch when he talks about the whole cheshbon of the spheres, he uses a mashal of a father teaching to a child. He doesn't use a mashal of a malamed teaching to a child, a father teaching a child. And furthermore, the Alter Rebbe says, the love of the child that the father has, and the desire that the father has that the child should be matzliach in his learning, that's what makes the learning succeed, pikama v'kama. So therefore, when a father is sitting with his son, not just to be yaitza chazara that he learned with his Rebbe, which is maybe the homework idea, but more that the father is taking this into his achrayis. This is something which they were not fully successful in imparting to him in cheder. And I'm going to work with my son and make sure that he gets this. And I have that ratzon for him to succeed. That will help him be successful. If a parent says he can't, I think that's usually not 100% true, but if he'll convince himself, okay, so hire a tutor. But we need to have some what they call brutal honesty. And if the malamed is not being forthcoming about this, then the parents have to investigate and ask the malamed, the manal, what to ensure. Baruch Hashem, in most cases, it will be fine. But you need to make sure that, and I'm not talking about leaving children back or anything like that. I'm talking about imparting the message that your child will not succeed if he doesn't have this under his belt. Whether it's kriya, pashut. Could I say the emes, if I may? If you have a 17-year-old bacha that struggles reading from a tilim, reading pashut lashon hakodesh with nekudas, What about Lashon HaKodesh? He has to read that without Nakudas. He doesn't just have to read it, he has to translate it, he has to understand the flow of ideas. He needs a certain level of mastery of Lashon HaKodesh, Lashon HaGemara, the way the Gemara operates. These are things that are skills that do generally get picked up through the system that's in place, but not always, and it needs to be checked and monitored. And you should know benafshehu of your son, because a child that has the learning skills, a bacher that has the learning skills, chances are he'll be learning. If he's not successful at it and he's frustrated, then it's too hard for him. He just gives up. If he has the skills, he'll be learning. And if he's learning, then he has the mayim me'atayra in him, and then he doesn't have the chashash of nechash and akravim because of mayim ein boy v'cholo. So this is a simple, almost technical, but crucial message that I think is important that parents and mechanechim should pay. I'm not saying no one's paying attention to this, but I think more attention has to be paid to this to ensure that the outcome is visadav sedai.
So you're saying that instead of showing up to PTA and your Rebbe smiling and saying your son's doing great, once I gave him a punishment, but otherwise he's good, and everyone goes home, and then they say the Dvar Torah is beautifully at the table, and then you know that you've done your job, it's incumbent on the parents to ask that question every year or every 6 months or whatever. Is he up to the level that you expect from your Talmidim at this stage? And if yes, can he do something about it? If not, what can I do about it? Whether it's myself or a tutor or whatever it is, but just being cognizant and on top of that. And it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. At the end of the day, when you come to yeshiva, and with all the other attractions, the social aspect, there's letters from the Rebbe that the Rebbe writes that the yeshiva is not only about learning, it's also about the atmosphere, which is true. But at the end of the day, what are you doing in a yeshiva? You're sitting and learning all day. And how do you expect someone to do that if they can't learn? And if they can't learn and they can't be successful at yeshiva, then they're bored. And then how do you expect them to? You're a lot, and you mentioned that it's a lot easier for someone to not follow the path in Yiddishkeit in general if he's just not if he's not succeeding year after year in yeshiva because he just can't. So it's actually very important. And it's also important that the fluency in Lashon HaKodesh is probably the most important skill to have, periods. And that's basically because even if you're lacking the information from the learning, but if you have the ability to acquire it on your own, then half the problem is taken care of. If you don't even have that ability, you're very, very limited. Okay, so that's very important. There's another point you wanted to mention, right?
This wasn't Akdama, but this is more of a technical, learning skills issue. And I definitely feel that, like you said, it's totally other. And I'm also telling it. I heard from Mechanech when I was in Kailil. He said that he does do a little bit with the statistics, and as a consultant, he said that most of the time, a bacher that's successful at learning and is matzliach in that is not the bacher that struggles in terms of Yerushalayim and going to places where you shouldn't be. Obviously, there are exceptions, but a lot of times it's pashut. I'm not matzliach here. Let me find a chevra that I could be matzliach in. Let me find the guys to hang out with that are going to make me feel super kanefesh. I feel like I'm accomplishing because I'm not successful in the Beis HaMedrash. So this is crucial, not just for learning, but for Yiddishkeit too, like you mentioned. And also, I wanted to make another point to what you said. The idea of connecting to the parents is also crucial. I wasn't thinking about that, but now that you mentioned it, not just to find out this information, but to preempt it and to always keep a connection. You shouldn't just wait for there to be a problem. Always pick up the phone and have a chat with the Malamed, just to touch base. And then this is crucial. It's another reminder. It's like I said, Seif Kol Seif, the Malamed is there with a big class, and he needs encouragement and reminders to zero in on the details and the individuality of your child. And the best way of doing that is maintaining a good line of communication with the Malamed, with the Magid with the Mashpia. Obviously, when they're getting older, it's a little bit different, but the idea is still there also in its own way. Yeah, the other point that I wanted to mention is more of a little bit of a more Yeshivas of chinuch, goes a little bit deeper. There's a sikha, which I would call like a landmark sikha in defining what chinuch means in our generation. This is a sikha of Yud Shvat Tavshin Tezvav. And Bein HaDvarim, the Rebbe talks there about 3 ingredients that are needed in chinuch. And I'll try to break it down more or less the way the Rebbe explains it, and then show how this could be applied on a practical level. Number one, a Yid has to have a basic recognition of his ultimate value as a Yid. He's connected to the Eibishter because of his muhus, and that connection to the Eibishter is the deepest, most important part of his life. He cannot imagine life without that. In his mind, in his heart, he should feel, me, not with my connection to the Eibishter, I have nothing. I don't have a life not just beruchnius, I don't have a life begashmius. I'm a nobody. This is who I am. That's an akudah. It's more like a Rachmana Libaboy type of connection. A Yid has to feel a connection. I'm Jewish at heart, but in a good way. I feel that connection to the Eibishter, and that's a deep part of who I am. That's Nukud number one in chinuch. Nukud number two in the chinuch is activating that in day-to-day life. If that's true, it is true. Because it's true that my connection to the Eibishter is so deeply part of who I am, let me actualize that in my life. Let me follow the Eibishter's instructions in Torah mitzvahs, which practically means be a frum Yid. Follow the Eibishter's ratzon in what it says in Shulchan Aruch in day-to-day life in Torah mitzvahs, being Hashem in Torah mitzvahs. That's stage number two. Stage number three in chinuch is really getting the mind and the heart of the child, of the Talmud. Filling his mind with Torah. What I said before until now was more like an identity, a very deep sense of identity of who you are. Doesn't necessarily mean you learned much about it, doesn't necessarily mean you feel much about it. It's something deeper than processing ideas. But when you're getting to that third stage, here's when you have to fill your mind with Torah. Your chachma, your bina, your das will be completely immersed in Torah's Hashem. That's going to affect your whole kaimas shleim of your keichs agluim, lashon of Chassidus, your kaimas hanefesh, and that's going to make the whole entire you be through and through penetrated with a connection to the Eibishter. So again, stage number one is the basic recognition that my identity is that I am a Yid. Before I even expressed it, expressing it in an haga hayom yomis al pi Shulchan Aruch, acting as a frum Yid should act. Number three, my mind and my heart, begoloi, are filled with ideas of Yiddishkeit, and that defines who I am and how I think and how I breathe and how I live my life in every sense of the word. So Rebbe points out like this. This is kind of stating the facts, but here's the way that Rebbe breaks it down. I think is very, very powerful, and the way that Rebbe puts it into today's day and age. Rebbe says like this: Amol, the first two ingredients were a done deal. The cheder, the yeshiva did not have to put an emphasis on that. Obviously, it comes up, but that's not what they were there for. The family did it, the home did it, the Yiddish Hagas did it. Because a Yid was being raised in an environment that Yiddishkeit was so real to him that he couldn't think otherwise. And obviously, the Bechir is always there. We're not going to go into that right now. But by osmosis, he got that. Where did the yeshiva come in? Nakuda number three. Now that you know you're a Yid, now that you're living like a Yid, let me fill up your mind and heart with teichen of Yiddishkeit, with seichel of Torah, and let me get this going through every fiber of your being. That was the way it was Amol. Today, this is not what's happening. We have to face the music and realize that a moiset chinuch has the responsibility to build the child and to build the bacher meiroishay ad kaf ragloi. I'm pretty sure it's the lashon of the Rebbe, from head to toe. Every part of him has to be developed under your care. You have to inculcate in him the basic recognition of him being a Yid and the tarikait and the fact that life is not life without it. You have to teach him Pashut, Hadrachen, Shulchan Aruch, Minhag Yisrael, and of course, the third thing too, of filling his mind up with Torah. That's the general Nakuda, what the Rebbe says over there. Now, the Rebbe mentions also that even within Chadarim and Yeshivas Gufa, a person that's, let's say like myself, who's Mashpia Zal, or say someone at any stage that's a little bit more advanced, could say to himself, look, you've been taking this idea and accepting this idea that step number one and step number two have to be done by the Meister's chinuch. But by me, that was done in kindergarten, that was done in pre-1A, that was done through cheder. Now I'm teaching him Imek HaSvara, now I'm teaching him a deep Ma'im Chassidus, now I'm teaching him a Svara and a Gemara, Higoyin of Havois Dabai V'Rava. It was also for me, I have to build them up from scratch, says Rebbe, yes. No one is freed from this achrayas. You have to take the full achrayas to work on all of these three areas. Now, maybe it's true, there's more emphasis at this age for certain ideas, but everyone has to be realizing that this is part of what he has to impart. What I would say, a simple, not so simple, but a practical way how this has to be implemented is, that whenever we're learning, whenever we're interacting with Talmidim, it can never just be that I'm teaching you a piece of information. However Kaddish v'tar that piece of information is, and however emes it is, there has to be that lebedik tnua of my Yiras Shamayim, of my Avas Hashem, of my Yiddishkeit coming through, and not just that I'm saying a class and I'm saying information. Every one of us is a dugma chaya. And in the way that we act, in the way that we talk, in the way that we convey even deeper information, there has to come across at the end this nekuda. I'll give you an example of how the Rebbe Rashab did this with the Frierdiker Rebbe. The way I'm framing it, at least. The Frierdiker Rebbe tells over, it's a shimmer, it's like he wrote it up in a letter, printed in his Igis Chedesh Chelik Daled, but it's he's copying from his Yaman from when it actually happened. He says, we were in a stov, if I remember correctly, it was Teves Tafresh Ayin Zayin, and he says, we had a Seder then, Frierdiker Rebbe had a Seder with his father to learn together b'chavrusa, sometimes by night, and sometimes he'd wake up early and learn with the kriyas. In Yom and Chassidus. Then the Seder was, they were learning Biyuri Hazayir of the Mittler Rebbe. Tifim Maimarim of the Alter Rebbe, Maimarim that were not even said to Klal HaChasidim, Maimarim that were said to his children, to Yechid Sugul of the Talmidim. And they learned it, I think it was a Monday, he said the date, I don't remember the date, maybe even Chav Aleph or Chav Beis Tevis. And the next day, the Rebbe Shab said, okay, tomorrow's learning session, we're also going to do Bashkama, but the one before was the night, I remember. And that was a Tuesday, I think it was Chav Beis Tevis, Tafresh Ayin Zayin. They were learning a Maimer in Biyurei Hazayir. A deep Maimer, I think it was Hanoch of maybe Ramesha, one of the sons of the Alter Rebbe, with Hagoyish of the Tzemach Tzedek. And it was a deep Maimer itself, and the Rebbe Shab can learn a Maimer, obviously he's Megala the Ra'imek. Everyone that learns the Rebbe Shab's Maimer knows the Amkus. And he was like what we would call saying a very deep Sheikh Chassidus to him. He gives even the structure. He would give me Hakadama before we started learning inside, and we learned it inside with deep Charifus and with deep Hasbara, with Hamaka. And they were learning for 2 hours straight. I think it was like from 4:30 to 6:30, if I remember correctly, learning this Maimer in Biyurei Hazayir. It was Geschmack, says the Frierdiker Rebbe. I had a chinuch. I was enjoying it. The deep sichlium that were flying in that room were Asaga Salikus were very deep. And it was obviously nikar on my face. And I sensed that my father also had that Geschmack. But at a certain point, the Rebbe Shab stopped. And he turned to the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe, I think, writes that he felt it was a reaction to his, to his face of the enjoyment of the Geschmack. And he said, look, so the Pilu Parish, and this is a famous word, but the Hemshech of the Rebbe Shab saying a little bit differently is not so well known. The Pilu Parish used to say that why am I so nizir in Yiras Shamayim, the Kinyanim, and Hidurim, and Chumris, that I should be able to be taking properly Einyan Chassidus. So So by me being careful and being zahir in every Hiddur mitzvah, I'm not threatening my purity of my neshama in any way. And therefore, I'm going to be a keli to understand the Chassidus better. Famous word. The Rebbe, by the way, Chazit this word from Bihil Parasha. Said the Rebbe Rashab. And I say, this is not so famous, and I say that the whole purpose for my limit of Chassidus and my deep understanding of Elichus is as soll sich ablegen an Inyan von Yiras Shamayim. That I should have an Inyan of Yiras Shamayim in a pnimistic, chayes pnimi, in a real way, in an internal way. That's why I'm learning Chassidus. So if it's just about the tainug, and if it's just about the geschmack, and it's an emsuchut gut, and I got it, and I'm amazed by it, that's not the Sefer Shel Davar. Sefer Davar, Hakil Nishmer, Elikim Yiravitz, Mitzvahs of Shemayim, how is this going to bring me to Yiras Shamayim? And that pnimistic recognition of Yiras Shamayim is what keeps a Yid on the right track. And if he knows that that's the most important thing in his life, he's going to make sure that he sees it through. And there's a very interesting story that follows, which from the context seems to be an oisfir of how, when a person is negated in Yiras Shamayim, he's going to make sure to go till the end to ensure that it works out in the right way. 6:30 in the morning, they finished learning. I said, let's go to the mikveh, says the Rebbe Rashab. Usually he would go to the mikveh later. And when he would go with his misharas. And the caretaker of the mikveh would be notified before when he was coming. This was a mikveh nashim, that mikveh tara that the Rebbe Shah would use in the morning.
This is
in Rostov. I'm not sure if this
famous mikveh.
Oh, so I'm not sure because it says in this letter that they went to the mikveh somewhere else. So I don't know if there were two apartments or this was before he built the mikveh. I don't know. That I'll leave for Chaykim to determine. But he went to the mikveh and he said, I'm not taking anyone, I'm just going with you, with the Frierdiker Rebbe. And they come to the courtyard, so it's clear that it was in a different building. They ring the bell, and the Shemer comes and he opens up for them. And he asks to speak to the Yid that was the caretaker of the mikveh. And the caretaker says, I didn't expect you now. I didn't know you were going to come now. He says, yeah, that's why I came now. I want to come unexpected. He says, 1 second, just give me a few minutes because I want to straighten things up in the mikveh. He says, no. I want to see the mikveh as it is now. That's why I came. He goes into the mikveh, and the first room where you come into the mikveh had a smell. You know, it didn't smell good, you know. We know what mikvehs could smell like. It didn't smell good. In the mikveh itself, in the room where it smelled, there was also things broken on the floor. It was a shtickle mess. Kitza. The room of the mikveh, he says the water was clean, interestingly enough. Even in this dirty mikveh, the water was clean, but over the water was flying bugs and things that were in the water. It didn't look that good, basically. And continues a quite sharp divrei musar, if you want to call it, to this caretaker of the mikveh, that when you know the chayes that you have, that yes, women amal used to be meisa nefesh and didn't care about what kind of mikveh they went into, but today, if there's going to be someone that's not going to go to the mikveh because of this, chas v'shalom, the chiyuv kares, etc., and the bnei hanida that come out of this, and the opposite, the schus that you have by maintaining a beautiful mikveh, and that people are going to want to use it to never be turned off from Taras and Mishpacha as a result of your actions. Could you imagine how much that has an impact?
The Rebbe says the story, by the way.
The ending, right?
Yeah,
then I don't think with the Hagdama. So the point is that here's a message how, in the moment of the biggest geschmack, how you could turn it and show how all of this is all about Kiyum Ratzon Elyon, making a Yid more connected to the Eibishter, fulfilling the Ratzon of the Eibishter, how it is in Shulchan Aruch, and doing it in the way it should be. Now, that Nakuda is not something which is only relevant, it could be relevant to anything. You know, there's a sikh of the Frierdiker Rebbe where he says that Muhammad, that teaches, what does he teach? He teaches Aleph Beis. Phonetics, he's teaching sounds. You know, in Chassidus, Chav Beis Eisius are not just in Lashon HaKodesh, in every language it sounds. We have different names for it, different shapes for it. He's teaching sounds, he's teaching Aleph Beis, he's teaching letters, was tut er? So the Frierdiker Rebbe, no. A real Melamed has a deep appreciation to the Kedushas Eisius. It's valuable to him. Not only is it valuable to him, they brennen in him. The Aleph Beis brennt in sein Herz. A Melamed that teaches Aleph Beis, brennt in sein Herz Aleph Beis. What does that mean? That's not about teaching information. To teach information, you need to be a good teacher and hold a class and make sure they memorize it. No, this is not what we're talking about over here. That too. But we're talking about that's a brennt in him Aleph Beis. And not only in him, but when he teaches Aleph Beis to Talmidim, the Aleph is a brennendike. It's a burning, flaming Aleph. When he teaches Kamatz, the Kamatz is a brennendike. That's a different limud. It's a different Aleph Beis. He says the same thing when he teaches real Pasuk Chumash. If in the Melamed, the Brentem, the Kedusha Satay, the Kedusha Sa'isius, that's going to be imparted by the child. You don't have to say anything. He sees it. I'll just take a random example. Something which comes up every Monday and Thursday, every Shabbos. In the yeshiva, it's part of our yeshiva. Maybe in a cheder, it's not part of the curriculum, but it happens every Shabbos when the father in shul. Kriyas HaTeira. Kriyas HaTeira, we have a big sign. Asul L'daber b'shas haTfilu Kriyas HaTeira. We know it's Isap B'Shulchan Aruch. Yeah, you could tell them. And you could even demand from them Kabbalah sale and maybe even, tell them off. Yeah, you could teach Yiras Shamayim, the technical, that would be the just with the second point. Yeah, teach them what to do. But the first point, recognizing that I'm a Yid, recognizing that I have connection to the Eibishter, could come through when you're teaching them not to speak through Kriyas HaTeira. Why? Because what's Kriyas HaTeira? Psichas Ha'aron. You know what Psichas Ha'aron is? There's a whole Sikh in the Kutei Deburim, rich description of Psichas Ha'aron by the Rabbeim. Psichas Ha'aron, the Rabbeim would move from their place. They wouldn't stand where they were. They would walk over to the Aron Kodesh, looking at the Sefer Torah. The Rebbe didn't do this. It's interesting. The only person I saw in our generation doing this is a Mendel Arana from Toronto. All Hashem used to do this. By Kriyas HaTeira, until he got very old, and he wasn't able to move around that much. By Psichas Ha'aron, I didn't realize why he was doing this until I came across the Sikh in the Kutei Deburim. He would walk over to Aron Kodesh. The Rebbe would turn. Yeah, you wanted to say something?
No, I was about to say what you're saying.
The Rebbe would turn and they would turn a siddur towards Aron Kodesh, to make that movement towards Aron Kodesh. When they would take out the Sefer Torah, they would look. And we know when the Rebbe was gazing at the Sefer Torah, as it was going towards the Bima, was a very intense gaze. I remember hearing, I forget from which Chossid, he was being tied the Rebbe's gaze following Rebbe Tzanchana when she would walk home. And he said, if you want to get a glimpse of that gaze, which was a mixture of deep ava, but deep yira, a certain like awe of his mother, look at how the Rebbe looks at a Sefer Torah. That's something which is on video, something that people later also, after Tafshil Chavei, were able to relate to. That look of chibas HaKadosh and yiras HaKadosh on the Sefer Torah, they would also point out sometimes to children looking at him, look at the Sefer Torah. So this is something's happening here. The Alter Rebbe once said, I think I saw this in Migdal Oz, if I remember correctly, that the Alter Rebbe told the Baal Koira, he said that when you're reading Parshas HaShavua, you know what's happening? That very same Hamshacha, that Eir HaKedusha, that was Nimshach, the very first time the Eibusha said that Parsha to Moshe Rabbeinu, that's being Nimshach right now in the shul by Kriyas HaTorah. Okay, so if you sense that, if you're aware of this, and you get into that mode, I don't have to tell you not to talk during Kriyas HaTorah. What do you mean? This is like the Friedrich says in a Maimer, if you're talking during Kriyas HaTorah, it's like coming into a palace and trying to push the king out of the palace. What are you here for? He says it's like an adz panim. He says these words. My mom contrasim. I remember exactly the Maramakim. It's like an adz panim trying to be megarish the melech mehichole. You had the schus coming to the heichal melech, and here the melech is, and you're rejecting him. So I'm not saying this to try to make midas adin come on anybody. I'm trying to say if you could give over to Talmud that this is what it means, this halach and shulchan aruch that you have to keep. But it means your connection to the Eibishter. It's an opportunity. It's a gila lekos taking place. The Rebbe Rashab, when he would be married, said that it says in the Shemis, tears were coming down from his eyes from gila lekos. Okay, I'm not saying that everyone is going to reach that level, but recognize that Shnai Mikveh Targum is not just a chore that you have to do. It's not just this thing, I got to do this, and if you want to be Mahadir to do it before you make Kiddush on Shabbos day and whatever it is. No, this is the way you're preparing yourself to access that Eir HaKedusha. You're saying these words, you're saying it a second time, you're saying the Targum, you're bringing it into yourself. This is Kriyas HaTorah. This is a way, and the same thing applies to any Inyan and Torah mitzvahs. There's a way to convey it, that it comes across, that it's lebedik, that it's real, that it's brent, that this is part of my connection to the Eibishter, part of my Yiras Shamayim. I want to make a suggestion. This is true for Bachrim, for parents, for Mechanchim. If you want to have a tool to be able to have that chinuch for yourself, like I mentioned, chinuch atzma and chinuch zulasei, a beautiful tool that's underused is the sichos and the reshimis and the letters of the Friedrich Rebbe. There's so much in there. By the way, also what I told you about the tier of Kriyas HaTorah is from sichos and reshimis of the Friedrich Rebbe. So much of the Malamed, the tier of how it's really meant to be. Chassidim, the way they were, the tzura of every Indian of Yiddishkeit and a real lebedik eifen, that's in the pages of the sichos of the Friedrich Rebbe. There were years, by the way, that they would start Fabrengen by quoting a sich of the Friedrich Rebbe with a certain round number of years prior to the Fabrengen, and the first sich or two were all revolving around that.
Yeah, the Rebbe could sometimes take a shtickle and dissect the lashonis in the Friedrich Rebbe uses. Yeah.
I have a little bit of a dream. I'm not doing it, and it's not trademarked. But if you're doing it, let me know, because like this, I don't have to do it. Take all the writings of the Friedrich Rebbe and to set them up. Paul Khan did it a little bit, but like Mama, she didn't have that much then. Take it and to set it up in Musagim. What a Fabrengen is? We all Fabrengen. You know what a Fabrengen is? I guarantee you, if you're going to learn the sichos of the Friedrich Rebbe and the Rebbe about what a Fabrengen is, you're going to go to the next Fabrengen differently. If you're going to read the sichos of the Friedrich Rebbe about the story of the Tzemach Tzedek when he put on tefillin and the Chossid that was watching from behind the door and saw the way the Tzemach Tzedek kissed his tefillin, you're going to take your tefillin, pick them up differently tomorrow. If a likut, pashat of musagim, of Torah mitzvahs, of inyanim, through your Seder Hayayim, but even if that's not yet written, to go through sichos of the Friedrich Rebbe, that gives you a she'ifa to gain hecher. I mentioned before that all successful people, I believe, in their Yiddishkeit, are born out of looking for emes, searching for the emes. The Friedrich Rebbe sichos are a beautiful tool to be a searching chassid, to be a chassid that's will gain a bissel hecher, will seine mehr optimistic. That's just a practical suggestion.
I was speaking to a Yid recently who has an interesting perspective. He's a Chossid and he learns Chassidus. He didn't go to Temple Temimim. And I was speaking to him recently. So there was recently there was a Hayom Yom about Tehillim, right? So he was telling me his perspective. It's very interesting that I'm noticing Chabad is all about the Haskalah, Chacham bin Adas, and the Chassidus. But then there's a whole nother facet that I'm seeing in Chabad, or that I see, or that I know in Chabad, is this Indian of Pshitus, and like the hispatos and the way it is the expression of it. He was saying is very much when you have to say the whole Tillim. I mean, this is a big Aveda. And usually that was relegated to Pash the Yidden, or, classically, the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe, famously the Rebbe said that when Mashiach comes, one of the questions is going to be, how many Yidden did you bring to Tillim, May 30? So it's like an interesting, this guy was telling me a perspective that's one of the elements that's demanded of everybody. You could be the biggest maskil, yet it's demanded of you to have a certain pshitus and Ernstkeit and Tamimus in Avedis Hashem, and the Rebbe told there was this guy, he wrote 9.5 Mystics, Herbert Weiner. He was a rabbi, and I think Reform rabbi, and then later he became a From Yid. There's a video by Dallas, the Rebbe telling I think the Rebbe's telling him to let people know about it, that he became a From Yid. So he has this book, 9.5 Mystics. He's hanging around 770 in the Yuds. He asked the Rebbe, he had Yeshivas. I'm saying this is the Yuds, right? So he asked the Rebbe, I noticed that with your Bachrim, they have a certain, like a problem that he's having. It's a certain naivete to them. And like, what's that about? I mean, so the Rebbe said, it's not a naivete. It's the lashon that he uses, and he quotes the Rebbe, is that they don't have a kera. I don't know how to translate that exactly. They don't have a split. They're not split. They have a tamimus. They have a certain ganzkeit and a certain. Yes, I remember there was once someone Fabring when I was a young bacher, and he was saying, "Soon when you're elder bacher, you're able to put on tefillin and close your eyes." I'm like, "Oh, really? That's a value, like hey, this is okay." So there's a certain take it seriously, taking it seriously.
You mentioned Tehillim. I think it's a very perfect example, because you could just say we're just doing the hard work of saying Tehillim, but the Rebbe printed Chossid Michtavim at the back of Tehillim. Mm-hmm. If you look at Chossid Michtavim of the Frierdiker Rebbe, that's by the way the Rebbe doing my idea for Tehillim. The Rebbe was malak.
It's not your idea, basically.
Yeah. I'm joking. The Rebbe would put the Inyanim of Tehillim, and if you read those stories and you read those tiurim of Tehillim, you'll come to Amidas Tehillim in a different eifin. I remember I was in a shul once here in Toronto. I'm here broadcasting from Toronto. I was in a shul, not a Lubavitch shul, and there was Lubavitch's doing because there's a Nashra Davin in that shul as well. And there's a Yid, somehow Beini Lebeini Achveis between in Chamayrev, he's browsing through the stories in the back of Tehillim. He's like Pashut, like he was Pashut the Reichkeit of what was going on over there. He was Pashut a spell from it. He wasn't nobody was telling him anything. He was seeing it himself. That's a perfect example where you could take Amidas Tehillim from being a chore and being something on a piece of paper that you have to get a quota and get tickets on your Yeshivas Hashem, whatever it may be, which is also good things. The Rebbe encouraged this idea of competition. But as the child gets older, for sure. But I don't know about Shas Machim Tillim. I'm saying putting it to Shas Machim Tillim. But the idea of the Rebbe was mainly focusing on mitzvahs that are shav l'chol nefesh. That's another brand for a different time. Yeshivas Hashem was meant to be a global thing for all Yidden together, not just for Anash. Okay, it's a different discussion. But the idea of as a child gets older, what is the power of Amidas Tehillim? What does it really mean? And I'm not saying that you have to have all Pirush Hamilus of the Tehillim, but even if you just have that appreciation of Amidas Tehillim that's in the Chossid Michtavim Tehillim, guarantee you walking Shabbos Varchim Tehillim in a different life.
Okay. I remember some anecdote about Chossid Michtavim. When I was a kid, I used to go through it, but it's in Lashon Kodesh. I didn't understand. So there's the one story in Yiddish that I understood, with the kutsher that had been seen in the Masharis. was esst du? Esst du den Meibischen? And the Kutscher says, I'm only, I live to get another Trink
Trinken
Brampfen.
Branchen.
Yeah. I was like,
Trinken Branchen und verbeißen. Also ich dachte,
verbeißen, yeah. Among Chassidim is brought to you by Chassidus Der Herr. We live in a chaotic world. A world where for us Chassidim is a seinu, lei ra'inu, we do not have the ability to hear and see the Rebbe on a daily basis. Yet we know that the Rebbe is very much with us, and the Chassidus Chabad is alive and thriving more than ever before. One needs to only tap into it. Chassidus Der Herr provides you and your family with the tools necessary to tap into all of this. Whether it's the monthly magazine, the way it all began, whether it's Der Herr books, Der Herr online content, and so much more. Men, women, and children throughout the world benefit and use these tools on a daily basis. Whether it's children enjoying the children's magazine that comes along with the regular Der Herr, or enjoying the children's podcast, whether it's Bachrim in Yeshivas receiving the Der Herr, whether it's girls in high schools enjoying Der Herr Club in their local high school. People all over the world and from all walks of life enjoy and utilize these tools and take advantage of it. If you're not already subscribed to the Herr Monthly Magazine, do so today at derher.org. That's derher.org. Der Herr is a dynamic organization which is committed to continue providing these tools, grow on a constant basis, and do all that we can to help this effort. Baruch Hashem, it takes a lot of resources and finances to make this all happen. You can be part of Der Herr through your financial support as well, through visiting our website derher.org, or through contacting us to setting up a meeting. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
One more thing I wanted to add about this idea of, as a mechanech, to convey not just the facts and the information, but the lebedigkeit and the emeskkeit of how you live it as Yireh Shamayim and Eiv Hashem. They're watching us, you know. We're doing mechaya. That's the fact. Whether it's a malamed, whether a mashpia,
Parent.
Parent. I remember once there was a simcha here in Toronto, a relative of the mashpach that was taking place in the yeshiva, and it took place right after Chassidus, before Shachris. And the Suda was happening then, and the Zal Bachrim were going on to davening. Because it was mishpacha, I davened before Chassidus that day. I davened with a 6:30 minyan, 6:45. I came to Chassidus, and like this, I was able to participate in the simcha. So after the bris, bagels on lox, whatever they serve over there, I washed. It's between Chassidus and Shachris for the Zal Bachrim. A bacher behind me also washed. So somebody told him, I don't understand. You're washing now, like you're eating. He says, what do you mean? Rabbi Kamman just washed. So people are watching us. You have to be careful. You know, the vis and the kim. That's another topic. But when a child, when a Talmud sees how seriously and how real your Yiddishkeit is, that has the deepest impact. When I was at the Shloishim gathering for the Elichaim Reitplat, I remember what year this was. This took place in Alateira, in the Chasana Hall. And one of the speakers was a Hirschel Chitrik, who was a Talmud of his, and back in Russia. And he said, I'll tell you how he taught us halacha. He didn't teach us halacha just because as a state. He said that the Bali Chaim didn't have money. And he came that day, you could see that he was Pashut hungry. I think he said he was saying he was in like trembling from hunger. So Pashut felt bad for him as a child. He gave him a portion or whatever he had that he was eating, or a chelik of it. And I don't think a Malamed would typically say yes to that, but he did because he was so hungry. He didn't touch it. He took it and he put it aside. After they finished, they didn't have running water in those days in the buildings. Water they had apparently, food they didn't. He went out and he went to wash in the Tilis Yadayim because it was a Meichel Shetibuli b'mashke. So he said, that taught me, that's how I learned halacha in Shulchan Aruch, there's different days of how much you have to be makbid on it. I'm not going to go into that right now, of how to be makbid on a Michael Shetibul B'mashka, that he didn't eat it when he was starving until he was able to leave and go and wash and then come back and then eat it. We once had Fabrengen here in Toronto, and Rabbi Chaike from Cleveland was visiting. He has his children here, and it was a Fabrengen. It was a big Fabrengen. It was the Shabbos together with the yeshiva, so they were serving different foods. I forget what it was. I think it was a Yom Pagra. So they had the fish course was first, obviously, and there was also salad. And everyone's eating the fish and the salad and the herring, whatever it may be, and the kichelach, fine. All of a sudden, someone comes from the kitchen and says the salad is a chicken salad. The taste, I guess it looked like maybe it was like hearts of palm or something, and it's really little pieces of chicken. So what happened? That means everyone's eating chicken salad with the fish. So, they started taking away from the table. I was watching Rabbi Chaike then at the moment. As soon as he heard that, instinctively he gathered everything from his mouth. I could see him doing that. He gathered it. He took something on a napkin, he spit it out, and he immediately took something in his mouth and he rinsed his mouth out. Most other people just swallowed what was in their mouth. And they moved it off. But that was Yerushalayim. You see that it's real. You see that it's something that it means something to me. It's not just a halacha on the book. This is how I live my life. This is what makes me excited. This is what makes me even anxious, because this is real to me. That's something which we can impart constantly to our children and to our Talmidim in the way we conduct ourselves, in the ernstkeit that we face a mitzvah and a hidur mitzvah, and the chshivas that we give it. That's something which is conveyed constantly in ways that are more powerful than words.
Okay, so hopefully we can achieve it in ourselves and give that over to our mechonachim.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question back to the learning part. So besides, we spoke about the tools to know how to learn, but there's a certain motivation needed. There's also there's different people have different personalities. What if you have a bacher that he's wired? I mean, today we have fancy names for it, ADD, ADHD, whatever it is. But let's say, at the end of the day, there's personalities. Some people, their personality gives them a hard time from sitting with an open sefer, Yom V'Layla. So that bacher needs an extra motivation, because it doesn't come so naturally. So what is a way to cultivate in our Talmidim and in ourselves, a healthy motivation for learning?
That's a very good question, and it doesn't only apply to the bacher or the child that has difficulty learning, because as we know, the oven, the bittul Torah, is something which is another nitzim b'chol yom, which means it's a constant challenge, even for somebody that has a geshmak in learning and has talent and has tzlach in learning and has those skills. And I'm going to say something which I think applies to everybody, and I think it's a little bit all-inclusive. One general point is, never try to whittle away and deflate a motivation. Any motivation that's going to get you to learn has value. Even if it's shalei lishma, it's not my invention. So yeah, if someone is learning because it says in Shulchan Aruch you have to learn, and he's going to have that level of Kabbalah, so just like he has to put on tefillin, he's just going to look see what it says in Hilchos Talmud Torah, and if it says I have to learn Yom V'Layla, fine. If I'm a businessman and I have a habit to go work, and even if he's not on that level that he's going to do it in every detail, but he knows this is what I have to do. Kabbalah sale is also a good thing. That's not a shalei lishma, that's a lishma. But then there's shalei lishmas. If a person is learning because of peer pressure, because of social pressure, if a person is learning because he'll feel like he's not going to be considered to be a normal mensch if he's not mishtatev in a shir limud, he's a shtickle of a loser, that's also good. If a person thinks of schar, einish, mentioned by the way in Tanya, einish bittul Torah, fine. Whether it's schar gashmi, whether it's schar ruchni, whether it's schar from a ben adam, whether it's a stipend, whether it's a recognition, all these things should not be deflated. Because don't forget, we are human beings and we have the nefesh bahamas in us too. So when our nefesh of the kids is not in the right mode, we could use those motivations. And every motivation is therefore useful, never to be discarded. Of course, we have to build and go deeper and go higher, but not to negate any motivation. Any motivation that brings you to do something good, keep it exercised. It's going to come to good use. It's a tool in your toolbox. But a little bit more in a pnimistic oifen, and I have to be a little bit true to my title that you mentioned before as a Mashpia that learns Chassidus, but I'm going to say a little bit of my signin. It's based on what we're all familiar with, which I think is a little bit more of a pnimistic motivation that could get a bacher to and a younger man to be more engaged and be more committed and be more dedicated to Limud HaTorah. I mentioned before those three ingredients that Rebbe mentioned regarding chinuch, and I want to fall back on that a little bit. If I recognize in a real deep way that my muhus is my being a yid, and this is what I'm looking for, I'm looking to amplify that muhus of who I truly am, I'm going to look for ways to make that happen. So for example, let's say he was mefatech by himself a little bit more Yireh Shamayim. It's negate him what the Eibishter wants him to do. It's negate him a Sifon Shulchan Aruch. This is a lebedike thing for him. If I know that I have to fulfill what it says in Shulchan Aruch, I cannot physically be an Amaretz and Halacha L'Maisa. If I'm ignoring it, that I'm not machshav it in my life, if this is not important to me, yes, then I might not know. But if I know this is who I am, I know this is how I would like to live, I know this is what I want to be, and I want to fill myself up with this fully, that's my she'ifa. So now I'm committed to fulfilling the rest of the Eibishter. I actually want to be frum. I'm not talking about any geis madreges. If I want to be a frumi and keep Shulchan Aruch, I will b'meshech hashanim automatically become knowledgeable in halacha. What do I mean automatically? I don't mean automatically that it's just going to pop into your head, because you'll feel, 1 second, I don't know a lot of information that I need to know. I need to know this. I have to know it. If you have to know something because that's negate to your success in life, I need to know it. There's no way that I could succeed without knowing this information. I might have to learn Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. I might have to learn Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. I might have to learn other Simanim Shulchan Aruch. I don't know available Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch from other Svarim. I will then have questions too. I will find things that maybe are not clearly in Shulchan Aruch. I'll have a Rav that answers my questions. I'll spend time figuring this out. Just by being a Frumid and wanting to live a life with the Ratzon of the Eibishter guiding me will, so to speak, force me to become quite knowledgeable in Halacha L'Maisa. Like, so for example, sometimes occasionally I go upstairs for breakfast in the yeshiva. One of the things they serve are cornflakes. Okay, I'm not saying this as a Rav. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi for further guidance. But over the years, right now they're stable with one particular brand. But over the years, there was different companies that they were buying the cornflakes from. And depending on how the cornflakes are made, it could be either a hadama or a shahakal. If basically they crush the actual corn into a flake, so it's still basically a whole piece of corn, it's hadama. If they grind it into a flour and then produce a paste out of it and then shape out, like out of a dough, they shape out these cornflakes, it's shahakal. This is according to my understanding, according to what I looked into at the time. And the companies were actually, different companies were coming into the yeshiva. So now, if I turn to a bach and I say, okay, what bracha is the cornflakes? And he's in the middle of eating the cornflakes. And he's thinking. I say, well, what bracha did you make on it? Oh, I washed, okay. Okay, but the other bracha next to you didn't wash. So if you're keeping Shulchan Aruch, you have to know what bracha do I make on that. I need to learn, say the Birchas and I need to find a little bit about food production. I will not become a Geisad of, but every Truma Yid, therefore, that true to himself, will become knowledgeable in halacha. Oh. So by extension, if it's not just about knowing what to do, it's about knowing who I am and who to be, that carries over to Limud HaTorah in general. Let me tell you an example. A mashal l'mahadavar daima. You have an individual that Rahman al-Islam lived through the Holocaust as a child. The parents, this happened, by the way, I'm saying it as a mashal, but this happened to more than one person, unfortunately. The parents died al-Kiddush Hashem, were killed al-Kiddush Hashem by the Nazis. They gave up the child to an orphanage, to a monastery, to a Goyish family, to a nanny. They were raised, they don't have any memory of their parents. They might have been babies when they were given over. They survived the war, and the nanny or the orphanage was kind enough to provide them real information about who their parents are and that they're Jewish. And now They're living a life that they're trying to live with Hatzlacha, as a Yid, as a human being. We know of Yisraelim, unfortunately, but this is different. This Yosem never met his father. Not only did he not meet his father, he doesn't have any clue of who his father is. Even today, unfortunately, in the story with Sidney, you can have a baby that lost a father. But I want to tell you that that child will know their father quite well from friends, family, videos, recordings, stories. Of course, obviously I'm not Chas Shalom. This is a serious issue. But they're going to have a certain feeling of who their father was, a certain feeling of identity, of how they come into the family and how their continuation is, because they have knowledge of that. But imagine this child that doesn't have any family, doesn't have any friends of his parents, is basically a totally separate person from where he came from. You can imagine the feeling of loss and the feeling of, like, I'm nobody. And he meets somebody that he discovers was one of his father's close friends. And this friend starts describing his father. You can imagine how the child will feel. Somebody passed through Toronto, I'm not going to mention names, and I mentioned him. His father passed away when he was a young child, and I told him something from his father, how his father would daven. I repeated a certain nusach tefillah, the way the tune that his father would sing. He was mesmerized. He was listening to me like he was in Gan Eden. And this is somebody that, not from the Holocaust, that doesn't know anything about his father. So, but this person who didn't meet his father, doesn't know who his father is, now meets a friend of his father. And the friend is describing who your father was. All of a sudden, he discovers my father was an intelligent person, a deep person. He starts appreciating details. Geht weiter. This guy brings him the biggest surprise of his life. He brings him a little attaché case. And he says, this is from your father. When the war broke out, your father put together family possessions, different things, and he put them in this attaché case and he buried it in the backyard of his house. He showed me where it is. And he says, if I survive, dig it out, and if you meet anyone from my family, give it to them. This is yours. And Mitamal, he opens that attaché case and he sees his father's work, his picture of his father. He never saw a picture of his father. He never saw his father before, a picture of his father. The thoughts of his father, the yichus of the mishpacha, the messiahs of the mishpacha. All of a sudden, he has a context. He's coming from somewhere. He's going somewhere. Going through, taking days to read everything through. All of a sudden, he comes to a pamphlet. And the pamphlet says, to my Tayyid Zun, with his name on it. He's reading a journal that his father wrote for him. And his father writes to him how all of this of the family and all of the chacham of the father, how this is going to you into the next generation. He talks to him about his keichs that he has. Maybe when he was a little baby, recognizing even the potential. Maybe he was a tzaddik with Ruach HaKodesh. You could embellish the story if you want. It's not a real story anyway. But this is the mashal. And he's giving him guidance and hadracha in his life, what he can do, how he can live his life. And the son, who's now reading this, let's say he's 30 years old, he says, wow, this guy really understood me. This is what I went through. And now this son will never let go of that notebook. He's not going to have to be told that this is something you have to learn and you have to live by. This is what he wants to be. This is what he was looking for his whole life. This is what he was missing. Ad kan is the mashal. Hanim shumuv me'atzmei. Yidden arbanim l'Hashem alikeichem. The Eibishter in Torah is exposing to you the deepest secrets, the deepest chacham about who you are, what life is all about, what you could accomplish, where you're coming from, where you're going, what you can accomplish here in the world. When you know that that's what Torah is, and you value yourself, I'm not talking about yeshus, you value who you are, who you're meant to be. You have a neshama, and you value your connection to the Eibishter. You have that she'ifa to gain hecher and to get more connected to that emes. And you have that machberes with your name on it. It's to you. It's you have your portion of Torah. It's not just halacha. Torah is telling you Torah's chaim, everything in Torah is molding the way I think. It's molding the way I feel. It's showing me direction of life. It's showing me everything. It's showing me how to live, how to breathe, how to think, how to view everything. So when you have that approach, again, a child maybe is not at that level. And maybe this child of the Holocaust survivor also was not on that level to appreciate when he was 7 years old. But as you're getting older, and you're the age that you're a bacher, you're maturing, think to yourself, what do you want in life? Was is wichtig zu dir? Let the emes resonate that you're a Yid. This is who you are. This is what you want to be. This is what you want to be successful at doing, at living more correctly. The Torah is that machberes that the Eibishter gave to you to know what your life is all about. When you have that she'ifa, let's call it, that strebung, that strebung to connect, and you realize that the Torah is your recipe, then you're going to have a motivation to learn. Now, I'm not saying you're going to use every minute. I'm not saying you're not going to battle a little bit. But you're not going to be somebody, why am I doing this? I want to illustrate it a little bit further and carry it a little bit closer to Ma'aseh B'Payim. Halacha. I mentioned before. Halacha is clearly showing me how to live. That machberes that the Yosem from the Holocaust had, the most important thing I think that he would cherish is how this gives me a purpose and a guidance in life. He might appreciate deep chacham of his father and the nuances and the words that he chose to use. It's amazing. But the most important thing I think that he will value is how it shows him how to live and how to be and who he is. Halacha is that chelik of Torah. I'm not chas v'shalom devaluing amkus and svara and higayin of Torah, but there's a certain beauty about appreciating Torah because it shows me how to live. And that's not only Shulchan Aruch. This is the mistake.
Ma'aseh Asher Yasun, Rebbe always says.
Oh, exactly. But this is the mistake. I'm not challenging any stadim in yeshivas, including the yeshiva that I work in or other yeshivas. I'm just saying this as I'm laying out the facts, and you could do whatever you want with it. There is a derech halimud that the Rebbeim have set up. There's a derech halimud. First of all, in Tanya, Perikei, when he talks about the Ma'il of Limud HaTorah, halacha is mentioned numerous times. When you have the psak halacha clear of how the Eibishter wants you to act in this world, even if it doesn't happen b'payil, fine, but the clarity and the vision of how life has to run according to Torah. So in the Hakdam of the Mittler Rebbe, to the Alter B'Shulchan Aruch, he says a Seder Halimud of learning Le'iyun. And that Seder Halimud is framed around Alibud Hilchasa.
Isn't there also, from the Rebbe Rasham, Kundus Eitz Chaim, a similar thing, right?
Similar, there are levels there. We'll get to that in a second. The Mittler Rebbe talks about learning the Masechta properly, the Asher and Taisvis, talks about learning the Rosh, learning the Rif, which are the Paiskim that take out the Tamsis Halacha from the Gemara, with the Mefarshim that they get to the Rif. He talks about then going to Beis Yosef. Then going to the Tur, come upon him on the Simon that corresponds to the Gemara that you're learning. Learning it with the Beis Yosef, which chazers over the Sugyas, including the core Yishayim that they get to that. Then learning it in Shulchan Aruch, which is embodying the Beis Yosef Bekitzer and the Darkei Moshe Bekitzer, the Ramah, and then if you have Alter Shulchan Aruch on that, which will include the Paiskim Achreinim, that's the derech limud that he describes Le'iyun. This is giving a Yid a clarity on Torah as it dictates halichos olam, how it gives him his guidance in life. In Hilchos Talmud Torah, the Alter Rebbe talks also about the chiv of Talmud Torah. The main emphasis is on learning halachos b'taimeim, learning not just the halachos, the facts, but understanding the svaros that are behind them, which comes from the Gemara. In Kundus Eitz Chaim, the basic limud, by the way, he also calls it halacha. Keeps on calling it, doesn't call it like we call it the sugya. Let's get the sugya clear. Because let's get the halacha clear in Mishnah and Gemara. Let's get the halacha clear in the Gemara. There are deeper levels of learning that he says are shaykh to people that are more advanced, but the basic framework of learning that Kundus Eitz Chaim spells out is also clarity of what the Gemara is saying at the end and how it's embodied in halacha. He doesn't stress the words a little bit in Kundus Eitz Chaim, but you see from Zechreinis as well, from the Rebbe, from Bachim that learned in Lubavitch, and Kol Yitzim L'chamas Beis David, he does kind of discuss a derech halimud similar to the Mittler Rebbe's Akdam and Shulchan Aruch Alter Rebbe. In the Sefer by the B'Shmel Sasson B'Shmel B'Tumer Zichrona Isai, he describes his moving through different yeshivas, not Lubavitch yeshivas, and he describes when he came to Lubavitch, he said, we learned Alibud Hilchasa. He said, we didn't spend time in Pulpulim that we're trying to understand ideas that we're not going to get to be Mevar the Halacha. We were trying to get a clarity in Halacha L'Maisa, and Imamish goes to the same process that I mentioned before, Bekitzer, of going through Gemara, Rashi Taisvis, going through the Rosh and the Rif, and going through Tur Beis Yosef and how it's expressed in Halacha L'Maisa, if it's applicable to Shulchan Aruch, or if not, the Mechaber and the Ramah. This idea of Limud HaTorah is not just understanding Amkus of Torah, and I'm not taking that away. The Chacham of the Eibishter is so deep that no matter how many Chidushim and how many Svaras we're going to understand in the Eibishter's Torah, there's even more and there's even deeper. But you have to give a Talmud a feeling that there's a direction. You have to give the Talmud a feeling that this Torah is not just about deep information, it's about guidance in life.
But it's not really done in yeshivas, no?
I think it should be done. I think it should be done more. I think this pathway should be accessible. I know there are others that are talking about it in public forums.
By the way, I remember a childhood memory. It was a big snowstorm when I was in 6th grade. Not the 1996 one, the next one. Like a historic snowstorm in New York. And barely anyone showed up to yeshiva. But since I grew up, across the streets from Alatayra, I was forced to go Nebuch. I remember what my teacher did with it was Rabbi Edelman was the teacher. What he did, he showed us, the 6th graders, how to do this. He taught us a Mishnah, Shtikal Gemara, and he went to the Riv, the Rosh, and then he all the way down to Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. I remember then being blown away. They're like, oh, this is possible. This is the process of Torah. I just remember. I don't remember that so much in Zal and Mesifta, but I remember that from 6th grade that one day.
It's printed in the back of the Siddur. Chumash, Mishnayos, till and one of the prints of Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, one of the Sfam of Alter Rebbe Shulchan, they added Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch on the bottom because it encapsulates everything. Oh, and Kundus says in Kol Yitzim L'Chumash V'Dov, he says learn the pasuk in Chumash, go to the Mishnah, go to the Gemara, go all the way down. This is a type of limud which, number one, is more shavel l'chol nefesh, because not everyone is shaykh to krichin as I feel, but it also is a directed limud which is showing a bacher, showing a yid how Torah is a hira b'chaim. It's not just chachma because it's chachma because it's the Eibusher's chachma for you and showing you how you have to run, how the world has to run, how everything is meant to be following the kavanah.
So why do you need to learn Gemara? Why can't it be like that? The Rambam writes in his Hakdama, they just learn Tanakh and then Mishnah Torah?
It's a good question, and the Alter Rebbe addresses that because you need to have halachas b'taimeim. The svaras are part of your appreciation of the halacha. If you just have the dry halacha itself, yes, you know the facts. The Gemara, which goes through the back and forth, and the Shakla V'Taya gives you the svaras that are behind that halacha. But when you have those svaras connected to halacha, it makes it more focused, more directed, and shows you more how this is all for me to appreciate. If I read that machberes that I told you in that mashal of the father that he gave to his child, if it would only be do's and don'ts, I don't know how long it would last. I think it would be harder for the child to appreciate. But if he had the context and he appreciated where this is all going and what's behind all of this, I think the do's and the don'ts will come easier and will come with more geschmack, with more chayes. That's the purpose of limud Gemara. Halachos b'taimeim. And when you go to limud Chassidus, this is for sure the word. If you're going to limud Chassidus and you're not looking for avinu shabashamayim, you're not looking to connect to the Eibusher, yeah, you could learn it, and it's interesting things, and it's geschmack. There's a lashon that the Rebbe Shab writes in Kuntas HaTfilah, deals with a challenge that people have, that they're learning Chassidus, and it doesn't really have a deep effect on them. It's not really niklat in them. It doesn't change them. And he says one of the reasons is, I'll tell you why, is because when you're learning Chassidus and you just feel Chassidus is interesting and it's like geschmack and it's nice, that has nothing to do with me. That's not about changing me. But if you learn Chassidus mitaychis eirus tshuva me'emek halev, remember correctly, that's the lashon. That's going to be a different Chassidus. I want to draw you back to the Teisha B'chsav of Teisha Chassidus. We started recently with Kislev, the new Machzor of Tanya. Some people focus on the Sharbalat, Perik Aleph, Perik Beis. Hagdamas HaMalaket is huge. But most people focus on the Shakla V'Tari about Yeshivas versus a Sefer and how this is going to solve all the problems and make it accessible. I'm talking about before that. The way the Alter Rebbe is pointed to the Chassidim in that letter, written as a letter. Aleichem Ishim Ekra. Shimai Laireit Tzedek Mevakshi Hashem. Listen to these words. The Friedrich Rebbe in a Sikha, I think it's in the Pais, he's encouraging learning Tanya Baal Peh. And he talks about Yud Beis Prakim, famously. It's Indian to learn Yud Beis Prakim Tanya Baal Peh, the first Yud Beis. But with the Aleichem Ishim Ekra. He doesn't call it with the Hakadama, with the Hakadama, with the Aleichem Ishim Ekra. That's the way he titled it. The Aleichem Ishim Ekra means, the Alter Rebbe is saying, I'm talking to Ishim, to people, Anashim Chashuvim, mention. I'm talking to people that are Reit Tzedek. They're looking for the emes. They're Mevakshi Hashem. They're searching for the Eibusher. And you're listening to me, and I'm going to provide you with answers to what you're looking for. If you're looking for the Eibusher, the Alter Rebbe has a lot to tell you. And not if, because the Alter Rebbe is addressing everyone. We're all looking for the Eibusher, but we have to remember that. We can't just learn Chassidus as a book, as a svaras, theologia. Now, I was sitting next to somebody on the plane, so we struck up a conversation. So they asked me, what do you do? I told them I teach Jewish theology. A guy. That's how I phrased it. But it's not just Jewish theology. Chachma theology means Chachma of the Eibishter. Maybe if I said the right word, I don't know. Somebody will correct me. This is not what it is. It's understanding how I could connect to the Eibishter. It's the book that my father gave me to show me how I could access him. If I learn Tanya, if I learn Chassidus in that way, that I'm a Mevakish Hashem, I'm a Reidif Tzedek, I'm looking for the emes, it's a different thing.
I was once speaking to someone from Williamsburg, and he told me that there's shiurim in Williamsburg that happens in Teres Chabad. He had something to do with it. The Gashmi is part of it. So I asked him, "Are you mishtatif in the shiurim?" He says, "No, ich bin nicht kein mevakish." So I'm like, "What? You found?" I asked him, "You found the Eibush there already?" Like, what do you mean you're not a mevakish? Like, everyone's a mevakish. Okay.
We sometimes think that a mevakish is like a weakness, like zucht malachim. It doesn't have to be that you become flowery and you become too ruchni. It's very simple. I realize who I am and I realize what I'm meant to be and I want to get there. Like I mentioned before, the story of our father and our uncle and our cousin, they were all looking for things. They were looking for he was looking for the shtetl. He was looking for menschlichkeit, humanity in his life. He was looking for Ein Sof. You have to be looking for something. You have to be mevakish, but you're not searching Baruch Hashem on the street. See people on mevakish and they don't know where to go and they don't have the emes. So we have the book in our hands. We have the Torah. We have the Chassidus in our hands. And if we're mevakish, then we'll be able to access it and we'll be able to appreciate it. So of course you have to be mevakish. And by the way, the emes rings true. And the emes is ma'amis atzmai. Mikol tzad, like the Lashon of the Ralbag that brings in Lukudas Chelik Vav. And Nikodim divrei emes. So if you're looking and you're taka looking, the truth is accessible and you'll find the truth. So someone that's taka looking, I believe will get to the emes. And I think you see b'muchash, Yidden that v'zuchen, come to Chassidus, come to Torah, come to Yiddishkeit. Everything else is empty. This is the real stuff. That's the deepest, most real motivation for me to learn, for you to learn, for anyone to learn Torah. This is my Hira B'Chaim. This is my guidebook for life. It needs a little bit of Kabbalah sale. I met once Simcha Werner, the Rebbe Chossid, lives in Monsey. Our family's connected to from the years that we were in the summer in Monsey and then when we lived in Monsey. So we were having a conversation. And he says, you know why your father has such nachas from his children? Probably referring to you, Yossi, right?
I don't think he knows.
He sees the family, Baruch Hashem, kinder was, that each one matzlich himself and has a hashpah on others. He says, I'll tell you why. It's because your father started with Kabbalah sale. I say, what do you mean? This is a story apparently that our father told him at one point, that when he first came to Crown Heights, he was looking for the Eibishter. Where do you find the Eibishter in Crown Heights? Looking for Ein Sof. So he was directed to Hadar Torah, and he wanted to go to the top. Who's going to tell me the emes? So they directed him to the dean. The dean was Rabbi Yisrael Jacobson, and I think he went to his house, if I remember correctly, and he knocked on his door, and he saw, also he never saw a yid with a board. A yid was up to Hechel 11. Yeah, he had tzur, he was about tzur also, and he was blown away. He thought it was like a malach, and he thought he's the guy that could teach him about Ein Sof, but he didn't know the words, but about the Eibishter. And he starts asking him questions, and he's trying, conversing in his English, and Rabbi Jacobson is also English, Yiddish, whatever it was. So he tells him, you want to learn, I don't know the words that he used, but he said, you want to learn, come back to me in a suit. He wasn't dressed, he says, and some people could have said, oh, this guy is, getting concerned about how I look and how I'm dressed. He said, your father had the Kabbalah sale to stell sich zu. So there is a certain element of Kabbalah sale in the beginning, but after zu stellen, there's no question about it. And it's not always going to be that it's my geschmack and it's what I'm looking for. And I'm not necessarily, I'm a vakish, like you said. And if I am a vakish, I don't know where I'm looking. I don't know what I'm looking for. There is a certain yesod of Kabbalah sale, but at the end, to keep it going and to make it a lifetime thing and a permanent thing, a part of you, you need to access that nakuda of who you are, the b'stayid, to hast neshama. This is the deepest part of who you are. This is the real you. This is what I want to be. This is how I want to live my life. Not just b'pel mamash, but in my kayma shlema of my mayach, my lev, from head to toe. I want to be embraced with the Eibishter. And the only way to change your mindset, to take and allow your mindset to be molded by the Eibishter, is that the Torah of the Eibishter is in your brain, and you're processing it, and you're understanding it, and you're directing your life accordingly. Be'emes, this is really what it means to Chossid Mashiach. Chossid Mashiach doesn't just mean that all of a sudden we want something magical to happen. Look at the Rebbe's Chossid Mashiach. Why does the Rebbe want Mashiach? And the Rebbe said, if we're saying that we want Mashiach because he's saying that we want Mashiach, then that doesn't work. The Rebbe wants Mashiach because I want Elikus to shine in me and to shine in the whole world. That's why I'm sending shluch, and that's why I'm encouraging you to learn to do mitzvahs. This is my life. This is what I'm here for. So now, if I don't have Mashiach, I still didn't crack the code. I still didn't get it. I still don't have it. This is everything. You can't want Mashiach and not be on Mevakesh Hashem. That's impossible. You could say the word Mashiach 100 times a day, but if you're not on Mevakesh Hashem and you're not doing things in your life to find the Eibishter, then it's a word.
And wanting to spread that to the world. Yeah.
How about the Mashiach is Gilul Likus? Is that you're passionate about Gilul Likus?
There's also another component that I'm thinking of. There's a certain inyanim like Bekudei Hashem Yishadim Misamach Lev, Teira Misamachas. That's kind of related to what you're saying, but especially if not, this is not specifically for Yeshiva Bacher, probably not. So you're in the world generally, and I mean in the world Kipshutta, it means that if you're running a life and you're married and you have children, there's always challenges, and if you're looking to live through those challenges and live from those challenges in the way that Torah and the Eibishter set it up, you're not going to be able to access it unless you're a person that's tuned in and plugged into the limit Torah on a regular basis. You're not in the right zone. You're not in the right place. So that's just another. Maybe it's even Shalei Lishma, but it's the same. I mean, that's not Shalei Lishma. It's if you want to be a Yid, then how do you access it? There's so many distractions today, but you have to prioritize it, limit that, and it's also so easy today because it doesn't have to be only when you are sitting and learning in the Shiurim Akvuyim, but it could be all the time. Car driving, it could be listening to positive things and being involved in in Kedusha. So that's hopefully one of the points of this podcast, that when you're not listening to a Sikha or heavy shir, you can also have the inspiration around the Arum, the Chassidus, and the Arum, the Torah. It's about all the same.
Chatzi shir bittul Torah. Someone once said, "What's the pshat chatzi? Could you be chatzi shir bittul Torah? Either I'm learning, I'm not learning. If I'm talking about learning, it's chatzi shir bittul Torah."
Right, exactly. Listen, if Fabrengens is part of the Dark Chassidus for this reason.
The Mendel Aronov used to tell Toronto that he once, when he was like, I would say the equivalent like Masifta age, based on how he was describing himself. And there was a Magid Shir, I don't remember right now what his name was. His name slips my mind. And he had a time that he would finish his learning exactly when their Seder Halim was finished. And one day he finishes and there's a time left. So he felt like, he miscalculated today. So he finished, then he says, today, because it's whatever the Yom Tagla, Mashpia vet Fabrengen the Tach. Then Nissen came into the room and he Fabrengen them, young Bachim, so it wasn't like a long drawn out Fabrengen. But the beginning of his Fabrengen was, Mevatlan Talmud Torah, Ipnei Hatzoy Sameis Vachnosas Kala. I think it's a word that also says from the Rebbe, if I'm not mistaken, but this is the word how he said it, that Mevatlan Talmud Torah, there's two things, Hatzoy Sameis and Achnosas Kala. Because that's what a Fabrengen is. A Fabrengen is taking out the Meis Shebah Adam, and Achnasas Kala's place on Nefesh, the connection to the Eibishter, and viewing that and internalizing that, by them, can verbringen, even at the time when it was set up officially for learning.
Right. Okay.
Obviously, it's going to bring learning.
Okay, so also, hopefully there's going to be, the Rebbe always says, a verbringen, what's a qualification of a verbringen? Yeshivas Achim Gam Yachad, we're Achim over here, Kipshute. But then also a qualification of what a verbringen is, that is Achlatas Tevis. So hopefully this discussion will Halvai Shif will be Bahashemim for us, will be Mesif in our Limud Torah, and for the Shemim as well, that will benefit from it. So yeah, Shekeach for the Chassidus.
I want to just add one more thing, based on what I mentioned before, that when you're looking for more of a pneumistic motivation, it shouldn't be at the expense of other motivations. Look, somebody that's listening to this might say, look, I'm not at that point where I'm such a Mavakesh Hashem like you're describing. I would say not to believe yourself that quickly, But there has to be a cultivation of the basic things. One thing I don't think I mentioned before, which is more short term. A geschmack in your learning, a hatzlach in your learning. Seichel is geschmack too. That's also, what I'm saying is something...
Chassidus, all the mishalim for chinuch is about seichel, by the way.
Yeah, for sure. So all these things, anything I said was not meant to be memayit from even reward systems or whatever it may be that's going to motivate a person to learn. It was just a little bit more, somewhat more of a pnimistic cook, and I think something which is going to make your learning a lifelong commitment and something that belongs to you, rather than something you're doing because of the setting that you happen to be in at the moment, which is what sometimes Bachim and Yeshiva think. We're learning because they want us to learn and because there's a Seder Halim. No. We're facilitating you to be matzliach for yourself. That's the attitude. Okay, not every Bachir is holding there, but you want to be able to get there. If you're not going to work on getting there, you're going to be a little bit frustrated. This is really a geula.
Yeah, and you see it. You see adults that might have gone through a phase that they're not appreciating learning, but then they mature a little bit, and they wake up and they realize, wait, I need to have a kvisat vatera, and I need to take this seriously. So the yeshiva is supposed to cultivate that, so you have it automatically, or you know how you have the tools. But anyone with a meich b'kod kodei realizes the value of this and the importance of it.
I just want to mention one more thing. I talked about before our parents' journey. So the first Yechidus before the Chasana, which you printed, I think, the Lashon that Rebbe said in your Chura for your Chasana, was that where it was from?
It's for our sister's Chasana. I printed it, yeah.
You got the transcription there. One of the things Rebbe says over there is...
transcribe the word for word. Right,
so one of the things Rebbe said there is to spread Yiddishkeit in a warm and generous way. So I want to give you a yashikeach. I mean, our parents, Baruch Hashem, Tzelainke Gesundte Jahren, are continuing to do that, and I think doing that, Heilig U'Meisif, I think much more than they were doing it when the Rebbe first told them those words. So you see the words of the Rebbe being fulfilled in them. And Baruch Hashem is going to the next generation, so you could continue to spread Torah mitzvahs and Yiddishkeit and Darkei Chassidus and the Rebbe's in Yanim in this warm and generous way. And generous means we're giving it to a lot of people. We're not just keeping this conversation for ourselves, but sharing with everyone whatever someone can take out of it, and then it was a worthwhile endeavor if that's what happens.
Okay.
So you should continue to have a lot of atzlach and that shlichus.
Okay. Kol ha'mevarech mizbarech. Okay. So Yasher Kayach, and thank you very much. And you should mizalzen hatzlacha in all of this.
Amen. Amen. Gamatem.